You guys are open. I've always wanted to try this place, but you're never open.
Yeah, we're not a Bloomingdale's. Those are our hours, but you really should be checking our Insta story regularly for updates.
Sorry. Can I get one of these scones?
The grain-free rosehip cacao matcha scones are only available if you're a Gemini rising.
All right, I'll do a hibiscus cardamom latte sweetened with coconut sugar.
What kind of milk? Today we have sesame, almond, hemp, cashew, potato, and raw goat's milk.
Do you just have normal milk?
Normal?
No, sorry. I just meant like non-vegan, like milk from a cow.
Interesting that you find animal secretions to be normal.
Pooja Tripathi is a very funny person, a content creator. Her series, Brooklyn Coffee Shop, has amassed over 50 million views, and it's been covered in the New York Times, plus many more places. And her Balenciaga and Home Depot / Dwayne Reed collaborations are exclusive items that we all need in our lives.
You never know what the original inspiration is going to be, but I write down everything that's even a little bit inspiring. I take photos of things that are funny and I kind of look at them and I see, is there anything in here that I'm inspired to write about? And over time, sometimes the ideas develop into something else.
This episode is all about the beauty of collaboration, how it's easier with others and often more fun, sending cold emails with no fear, and how it only takes one yes to get started. Do you still play violin?
Yes, yeah. I don't play as much as I used to, obviously, but I try to find ways. Sometimes, every so often, there will be an audition that comes along with violin, and I'll have to break out the violin and practice nonstop to try to get to my old standard. But I do sometimes play in bands and kind of like indie bands around New York. And then there's the Park Avenue Chamber Symphony, which is a non-professional orchestra. I played with them for a lot of seasons. You can kind of opt in each season once you get in, but the audition is difficult. It's a legit audition process, and the musicians in that are really good. And I've also played in a lot of weddings.
Just you, or there's like a singer in the background, or just like violin?
It's been a lot of childhood friends kind of resurfacing and being like, I want you to play at my wedding. And that's been cute because that's kind of my wedding gift, but it's really sentimental. And the grandparents are just sobbing. And violin tugs on the heartstrings, you know?
Why do you think violins make people cry?
The frequency really sounds like the human voice. It's close. Violins are such a good fit for either mournful breakup. In the indie bands, I'm always playing in the breakup songs or the love songs. And then when we come to weddings and funerals, like it's just kind of both of those things are a good fit for strings for some reason.
Who am I speaking with today?
Oh my God, that's what I wonder all the time. It's good to start out with the fact that I used to work in corporate. It was a while ago now, but I worked in fashion in corporate. And at that time, corporate wasn't really the best fit for me going in every single day. Fashion, it's very self-serious. It was so intense and people took it so seriously. And it was not, I would not say that I had like pleasant working environments at that time. And I had a friend who I met on a boat in Saint-Tropez in the south of France, which is crazy. And she is Dutch, and she came to New York for acting school. And so things were not, going very well at this fashion job. Finally, my friend was like, I want to make a show and I want to make it with you. She funded it. So we shot a 6-episode web series, half in New York and half in the Netherlands. We wrote it together, we produced it, and I also acted in it. And I got representation from that. And this was like around the COVID time. And then my manager was like, why don't you start a TikTok? I think it would be really good. You could refine your comedic voice. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know. It's just such a thing. But it was such good advice because it's true. While you're figuring out what to post, you do need to refine your voice and figure out what your point of view is. So I did that. That now was 4 years ago. And that ended up being such a bigger thing than I thought it would be.
What is your voice and your point of view? Like if you said you'll refine it, what is it?
I think one thing that sets me apart, or that really does a lot for my content, is the fact that I've had a lot of different life experiences so far. I had corporate, not corporate. My dad lived in New York City when I was growing up. My mom lived in Pittsburgh. I traveled around the country a lot, based on where my dad was moving. I have had a lot of different types of jobs. I went to business school and I studied business and and violin performance. That group of who you're around at that time is so different from your peers when you decide you're going to be an actor or decide you're going to do comedy. So I've been around a lot of different types of people. And I think because of that, I can make content from the perspective of a lot of different people and play different characters and understand what's going on with them because I've met all these people. And a lot of what I write about is in New York. That's just where I live. And there's so much inspiration in New York. There's so many funny things happening every single day. You go to a coffee shop and the entire interaction can be so funny. You go to a party, you meet finance bros, you meet artists, and the whole thing is already like happening. It's already funny and happening. So watching it and giving a commentary and satire is what I've been doing online.
You still make fashion.
In a sense, I think because of working in fashion, I'm actually wearing my sweatshirt. I decided to create shirts and sweatshirts under the concept of collabs that don't exist because there are so many collabs, so many brands out there that collab. We all know that. But there are some that would just be so funny if they existed. So I decided to do Gucci x Dwayne Reed and then Balenciaga x Home Depot and MoMA. So it's like MoMA x Momofuku. And we did like photo shoots with other comedians out in these places. We went to Dwayne Reed. We went to Home Depot. It was really fun to make these because it's just goofy. And it's something that I thought my audience, I feel like it's a high standard with this audience. When I click on people every so often, I'll be like, oh, you're the director of this gallery. You've written all these books. Everybody's so impressive. I was like, I need to offer something cool to these people.
I love them. I think they're great. And I think they're collabs that should exist. I honestly am genuinely like, maybe brands aren't thinking expansive enough.
Yeah.
Like, why isn't Gucci repping Dwayne Reed or Walgreens?
Yeah. I think the high-low thing in fashion has come a long way. It used to be such a taboo for brands to go out of their exclusive branding and do anything that's lower. But then over the years, everybody did a line for Target, for H&M, for everything. And now I feel like we're getting into the era of random partnerships where you're kind of like, Verizon X Off-White. Okay.
Did you draw the images also?
No, I actually worked with a graphic designer whose work I've just seen around the city. I saw her work on this new gym in Carroll Gardens, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. I really liked the style of it. It looked like kind of sketched weight, one singular red weight sketched. And I was like, wow, this is chic. This is so much chicer than any gym branding I've ever seen. So I looked her up from there, and her work is really cool. Her name is Ayaka. She's really talented. And so we worked together. I told her the concept. We decided what the objects should be for the collabs. So for the Balenciaga one, we were like, do we use a hammer? We thought we could use a drill. It looked a little bit violent to me, a drill. I was like, let's not do that. Like, let's use things that are big enough to understand what they are. So we did a whole process over the summer, and I'm hoping to come up with more. I have a few ideas for some more collabs. So we'll see if I end up making more.
What is the process? You said you go around New York City and like everything's so funny. I'm inspired all the time. But what does that really look and feel like to be at a coffee shop and say that's funny, but to actually turn it into something? Because also not everything that's funny in the world is actually funny. Context is everything. And so what is this process of, I want to make a t-shirt, but let me actually do it. Or I think this is funny. Let me turn it into a sketch.
I write down everything that I find like especially funny or special, even if it's just something that somebody said that stuck with me. And sometimes an idea will stay in my notes app for months or never make it out. I just have it there. I have that idea. These shirts actually started out with a video. That's how they started. I decided to go stand in line for this vegan pastry pop-up at 11 Madison Park. I was like, okay, By Chloe, which is a vegan little chain, was going to do a pop-up there. And I was like, the stuff like this is always, it just feels like there's always such long lines. Let me just go though. Anyway, I mean, that does sound cool. It's not far for me. So I went and stood in line. It was such a long line. And in the line, everyone was talking about the line. And I just thought like, this is so New York. And then so many people stopped by and being like, what's this line for? And I was like, the number of times I've heard somebody say, what's this line for? The people in the line answer, it's like something super hip, and they're like, it's this collab. And then the person is like, okay, they roll their eyes and they leave feeling a bit superior because they're not like dumb enough to stand in a line. Yeah, I've seen this so many times. So I made a little series, New York City lines, where I just made up a bunch of reasons why people would be standing in lines. And one of them was Gucci Dwayne Reed pop-up. And then I was like, you know what? It would be funny to make that into merch. So it kind of, you never know what the original inspiration is going to be, but I write down everything that's even a little bit inspiring. I take photos of things that are funny and just let it sit on the app. And then when I sit down to write, I kind of look at them and I see, is there anything in here that I'm inspired to write about? And over time, sometimes the ideas develop into something else.
You have good quality in the shooting. You're in the actual coffee shops, or you're in these places. Let's say there's other people listening who have these great ideas, but they don't have the fun. Like, what's the creativity? Is it just like, I'm going to pay for it, or are you getting it funded, or is it favors? What's the creative process to actually then getting it done?
I think the number one most important thing is to have people around you that are creative too and are willing to collaborate with you on an idea they're also excited about without asking for anything up front other than being part of the process. Because if I were to make coffee shop for the real price that it would really cost, if it wasn't all favors and it wasn't all, friends that I'm working with, it wouldn't have been possible. They're also talented and their rates are high. But I have a group of friends that are talented filmmakers, and our cinematographer, his name is Eyal Cohen, and he loves coffee and he loves coffee shops. And I made a series of green screen videos about coffee shops that were just TikTok green screen. I played the customer and the barista. They did really well. And Eyal was like, we could shoot these in an actual coffee shop. Like, we could do it. And just him saying that, just him, one person saying that, made it possible, because he is such a good DP. He also does the post sound and the sound mixing. He does the coloring and any effects at the end. And starting with him, we built a very small team of like 3 or 4 people. And we went in and we did the first one. All the actors were my friends. We just kind of tried it out. I cold emailed the coffee shop that we work with, and that has been our coffee shop till now. I literally just cold emailed them and maybe 50 other coffee shops. And they were the first one that responded. So we went in and shot it, and we had friends edit. We just kind of did this for the first time to see how it went. The first 4 episodes did really, really well. So we were like, okay, how can we keep this going? Now we're 14 episodes in now, and it has been successful. So we're like, how do we keep this going? And I'm the one just figuring out strategically how to make it happen. Now I pay them, but they give me a really low ends rate because it's just me doing this. And the goal is definitely to at some point find some sort of funding, whether it's working with a brand for some sort of brand partnership or whatever it might be. I'm constantly thinking about how we can make something happen with that. But it is, at first, I think it's definitely about being resourceful and seeing what you can do. And honestly, everything I've ever gotten in this career, I've gotten through a cold email. That's how I got my managers and agents. That's kind of the way that I do things. I'm just like, well, there's nothing stopping you from just emailing people. You can find their email addresses online. And if you have an idea that's good enough, you really only have to convince people for that first time. And then if it does well, after that, you just have so much more leverage.
That's the beautiful takeaway, the 50 cold emails. Like, there is a bit of work to emailing 50 people, or a lot of bit of work, to find the email. Who am I emailing? I got to look it up on the web. I got to then go to my Gmail or whatever. And 50 emails is a lot. Can you say, if you're willing to, what the coffee shop charged you for the first one?
They didn't charge anything.
Amazing. Cool.
We are working together as a long-term partnership. At some point, I definitely hope to be able to pay everyone the full amount, including them. They, that coffee shop, it's a special coffee shop. I lucked out having to, that's happened to be like who I cold emailed, but
you want to say their name, you can shout them out. Yeah.
Yeah, the coffee shop is called Larry's Cafe, and it's a Vietnamese coffee shop in Williamsburg. And the owner, Tuan, he is a Vietnamese adoptee, and he decided to create this coffee shop kind of in honor of his late father, who was a local Bushwick school teacher. And so the place itself, it's a special place. It has a strong story behind it, and they have a community. They have events going on there. It's tiny. They still manage to always have pop-ups and events. They're so nice. And they're kind of into creativity and fostering creativity and community. So that's, I think, why they were interested in working with us. And then along the way, now it's different because now we've had millions and millions. I think we've had like over 50 million combined views. So the coffee shop, a lot of people have seen it. We always tag them. I actually just posted yesterday, like a full post explaining to people that this is the set of the coffee shop, because a lot of times they think that it's real. They think that the coffee shop of the show is real. So explaining that and telling people to go visit, without their generosity of allowing us to shoot there like that, we wouldn't have been able to do it, because all of these things cost a lot of money, especially in New York.
I just want to repeat that again. So 50 cold emails, you get a free place to start, because I think for a lot of young artists or creatives or entrepreneurs, starting is the hardest part, because
Yes.
they get nervous. They write something really beautiful and brilliant and funny, and then they're like, I just can't do it. I don't have the money or the this, and you just got to begin, like send the email. It only takes one of anything, I often say. It only takes one.
I think we only got 2 replies in that round of 50 emails.
Not a high percentage, and yet it's all you needed.
It's all we needed. And now Larry's Cafe is the set of the coffee shop, just because they're the ones that at first were willing to help us out with that. So definitely, you kind of just have to psych yourself up to be like, what's the worst thing about sending an email? And definitely make the email professional, though. Put everything in there. I had something to start off of. I had the series of green screen videos that I made at first, and those did well. And so I linked them all there. I was like, this is the concept. It did well. You can do things. That's the cool thing about social media, is you can do some things in a really low lift way and prove a concept just like right out the gate without anything.
I'm going to give you an idea that might inspire a lot of people. Publish your email.
Publish the email. Wait, that's such a good idea. You're right. That's a really good idea.
I think it would be very inspiring to a lot of people who would love to begin. So I'll just let you have that. Okay, so you've had a really successful hit on your hands. What is the pressure? This is like a twofold question. One part is social media is a bit of a vacuum. It's always about what's next. Art is a bit of like that. What's next? What's next? What's next? I did one good thing. Okay, what's next, right? Like, they're not all hitting 50 million. What is that pressure on you to keep coming up with something? What is your relationship to a world that is so inundated with stuff? There's so much stuff. Like, you're only as good as the next thing, because we have so much stuff. Like, new clothes come out every day, new videos, new sketches. So what is your actual relationship to your own pressure or pressure from the outside?
I've decided in my strategy to kind of not go that route. That is definitely true. You need to feed the algorithm and you need to put a lot out there. There is a lot of pressure to constantly think of new ideas. And if they don't hit, you're like, okay, I guess I'm a has-been. I guess 2 weeks ago, I was like so amazing and funny. And now 2 weeks later, I'm literally just washed up. Like, I literally will look at videos and be like, what did I like? I had a real, I was on a roll back then, and it was like a week and a half ago. But I think with the coffee shop specifically, we decided, okay, this is like a high production value thing. It's not the easiest thing to produce. It's high production value. There's props, there is equipment, there is a small team involved. We have to go and write these scripts, and it's production. So it's not possible to have a new one every single day. It just isn't. Maybe weekly is more my goal. But I think because it is something that takes a little bit longer, I think that's actually rewarded on social media, because it's not something you see a lot on there. You're scrolling and it's a lot of one thing. Then all of a sudden you look at something and people are like, what is this? Is it a TV show? Is it a movie? Surely it can't be just a series for TikTok, because it doesn't look like that. And I think that intrigue is what keeps people sometimes watching a little longer, even if they don't know at all anything about this, and works in our favor. And we decided to do something a little bit different. And that decision has paid off in this case. With this series, I think there's so much we can do, just like with any other. At its core, it's really like a workplace comedy. I mean, in a very small, distilled into like 1.5 minutes, there are so many scenarios that could come up. There are endless customers that can walk into the shop that can color the conversation, depending on whatever their comedy is, or they could even be musicians or athletes. I have a longer term vision for this particular project. We also did a sci-fi spin-off, like 100 years later, what would this coffee shop look like?
Another influencer trip.
Yeah, you didn't hear? Maybelline and Coca-Cola partnered up. They sent us all to the Martian craters to try and bridge the gap between humans and aliens. It was super, super incredible work.
Did he just say the A word?
We prefer the term non-human here. Was that not in your creative brief?
Fine, shut up. Can I just get a water buffalo milk latte with a pump of the Lexapro anti-radiation syrup?
Water buffaloes literally just went extinct 5 minutes ago.
Did you not hear about Typhoon Zeke? It wiped out that coastal town in Idaho.
The one where all the water buffaloes lived.
No, that's terrible. Water buffaloes are my favorite. Well, I hope they harvested the genetic code at least. What other milks do you have then?
That did really well. And so we're making 6 more sci-fi episodes. And that's a whole other world where it's like a sci-fi future that's dystopian, but still funny. And still, there's still influencers. We're still in New York. We're still kind of like caring about status and all these superficial things, even though it's 100 years from now. For some reason, sci-fi is always taken as this like heavy, serious thing where everyone is like, you know, nobody's shallow anymore at that point and nothing is really funny anymore. And I think we were like, let's try something different. So that whole world could be something else. I want to see this idea through because I think it has a lot more potential that we haven't even gotten to yet. And then I take it step by step. One day, maybe I'll wake up and say, okay, we've produced 400 episodes of Brooklyn Coffee Shop. And I think maybe we've like done what we needed to do here. And then I'll come up with something else. You always come up with something else. By then, you know, it's already been 2 years since this concept first was an idea. And so along the way, you just get more ideas. I never would have thought of this sci-fi concept on my own. It's only because we collaborate with other people and together with Benton, we came up with that idea. So along the way, you meet people and you get inspired and there's always going to be more ideas.
Heavy on the collaboration. It's a word you've said like 20 times. Not in a bad way, in a beautiful way. It's like, it's so wonderful. And I think it's something that's not recognized or maybe spoken about. There are very few things in this life we do alone.
Yeah. And I think social media for the longest time was very solitary. You know, you can do a lot of it alone. It gets weird to just like do things by yourself in a vacuum. And I just noticed, honestly, the coffee shop project has been such a clear example of what can happen if you have a good collaboration because, you know, the other actor who plays Kale, the other barista, he's one of my closest friends, DJ, and he went to Juilliard and he's been on Broadway and he's such a good actor. And the stuff he comes up with on his own, the improv he comes up with, I couldn't write that. Or the other actors that come on and they play customers, whatever they come up with. I mean, they're all amazing comedians. And the way that the back and forth, you can't plan for all these things. You can write a good script, but it takes kind of these random moments from a lot of different people to come up with something really special. Otherwise, it's just one perspective and the audience responds to different perspectives because they relate to different things and different people based on whatever they've experienced in life.
You are a brown woman. Does that influence your comedy? Do you have parents who made you study business, you know, and like play the violin and is you discovering comedy a way of sort of taking your own space up in the world, coming back to yourself? Yeah. What is your relationship to identity in this process?
I did have the background of, you know, an expectation to go to medical school straight up. And I didn't want to do it. I don't like needles. And even the lighting in hospitals freaks me out and the smells. And I don't like the hospitals. They freak me out a lot. It's just so intense. It's so intense. It wasn't for me. So I study business because it's a vague thing. I still am like, what even is that? I think it was a useful thing to learn about something vague that's applicable to a lot of fields. But the real reason that I ended up in comedy is because I didn't want to work in corporate. I was working backwards. I think I've been working backwards for a long time. I knew I didn't want to go to medical school. So what was I going to do? Oh, business is vague and I'm a violinist. I'll study business and violin and I'll buy myself some more time. Then I worked in fashion. No, this isn't really it. I don't really want to do corporate. And I meet this friend literally in the south of France who was like, hey, let's make a show together. I'm really open to what happens in life. And I like to have interesting experiences and I like to meet people. And as that is happening, I'm really open to, oh, this person is living a life. I dated somebody when I was younger who his entire group was artists, and I just came from business school. And I was like, why am I going to this office every single day? They look like they're having so much fun. Like, I understand that it's scary and you don't know where your money's going to exactly come. But I was like, how are they making money? How are they even able to make money at all? The only thing I know is going to a job every day and having a salary. So over the years, I started meeting these people and being like, they are living life really differently from how I grew up and how I thought you had to make money in the world. I was like, I just don't want to, I want my life to be exciting and fun. And I want to be excited about what I'm doing most of the time. And no job is always exciting. Every job is hard work. And if you're doing it at a high level, it's not glamorous, but still there are certain things that you can tell you're enjoying more than others. And working with that friend and making that series that we made, that was really fun. I was enjoying the comedy element of that series more than the others. And so I just kind of try to follow these leads, but it really started out of being like, I don't want to go into this little office every day, and I don't want this to be my life. I'm still young. I have time to pivot to a different life. And then when it comes to all the cultural elements, obviously any immigrant family is interested in security. So this is not a secure field. It's not. And it continues to not be, even though I've grown a following, and it's still not a secure field. I will say I've been able to have part-time jobs along the way because of the initial corporate background that I had, which is helpful. I've always found a way to make it work. And my family eventually has been supportive. My mom, I think, just like anybody else, just like Larry's, when we first reached out to them, like, everybody is looking for results. And that's not always the best way to deal with art. But for me in particular, it is the way that I've dealt with my career, because without results, how do I make money, and how do I prove that I'm going to do something that's like worthwhile and other creators should work with me and all of that. So I've been focused on results, and that's why I've leaned heavily into social media, because waiting around for auditions and stuff is just, you just don't have any control over that. And I think over time, my family has seen that there is a career here, and that I'm willing to do what I need to do to figure out how to turn this into a real career that I can be supported by.
I can vouch for, and I will take it to my grave, being a living artist, one who pays their life through art making, is as difficult as any medical school or heart surgery. As someone who has been an artist for 16 years now, I can honestly say it is the work for which all other work is preparation. You said the vibe was not to become an artist, but also, didn't they give you a violin? Or do we put the violin in a different category? Is that not art? Is like playing violin like an acceptable form of making it in an immigrant community?
So it is definitely art, but the purpose of why I was given the violin was for college admissions, for life enrichment. It wasn't
Interesting.
for make this into a career. And actually, I went really far with the violin, and I was really interested in it. A lot of the other people that I played with at the time, their parents were really pushing them. That wasn't the case for me. I was actually really into it on my own. I kind of got like a competitive, I wanted to be like getting good seats in the orchestra with the seating auditions. Like, that kind of came from me. Nobody was saying you have to do this. And if anything, they were kind of like, all right, go back to studying. Like, this is not we didn't mean for this to be like the main thing. But it did become like a really big part of my life. And I actually do think that it probably was kind of step one in all of this. But they were supportive for sure, all those years of driving me to orchestra rehearsals and watching if you give your kid a violin when they're 3, you're in for a ride, because it does not sound good for at least 10 years. And you're squeaking for all those years. So I think they were kind of intrigued by why I was so interested in this, and they were supportive, but it was never meant to be my career. But I think it did spark something, and it was the beginning, because it is a different side of your brain that you're kind of using than regular academics.
That's cool. I wish my parents, they did so much wonderful stuff. They never gave me an instrument. And it's something I think about a lot. And ever since when I turned 30, I got a piano, and I've been teaching myself piano off of YouTube for the last many years. So
That's
it's
awesome.
like,
I mean,
it's amazing what it does to the brain.
it's amazing, and there's something about it that is so different now than when I was a kid, which is that now it feels like such an amazing thing to have a hobby or an activity that you can do that has absolutely nothing to do with any screen and is like really tangible. You're holding this instrument in your hand and the music you're making is like acoustic. That feels like, I don't know, vintage now. Like it feels, everything I do, my whole job and career, and for most of us, is on our phones and computers. So it, to be able to, when I was playing in that orchestra, it just feels so good to have a rehearsal for 3 hours where you don't check your phone at all and you're just having to be present and you're just literally holding something. It just feels like such a separate thing. And it's really, I'm really glad that my parents started me on that, my mom specifically.
Do you feel like you look at your phone too much?
Of course I do. And you know what? It's not even my fault. That's like what it's there for. That's what it's built to make us do. And we all have a different reason for the addiction to start, whether we're consumers or whether it's our job. But it is really hard to not interact with your phone. That's just the way that it's set up. It wants us to interact with it like that. And it's really hard to avoid.
What's the role of comedy in a political time that I think will not be funny?
I think the role of comedy is especially important in a political time that is not funny. We, in coffee shops specifically, I've we've talked about a lot of political things in a very kind of like, you know, it's a minute and a half episodes, but we've had like Southern tourist who's obviously conservative coming to this obviously liberal shop. I think one thing that I really like about how we relate to politics in this series is we're not we're not really here to push like a specific agenda. If you look at the rest of my posts, it's pretty obvious like where I stand on the political spectrum. But with this particular series, I think it's cool that we have an opportunity to actually create understanding more than anything else, because humor, we don't all have the same sense of humor and we don't all find the same things funny. But if you create a situation where everybody is ridiculous and we are able to for sure laugh at kind of everything that's going on, it sometimes makes you question a little bit your preconceived notions. Like you watch an episode and you're kind of like, everything that's being said here is ridiculous. And there is something extreme about every notion that's put out there politically. Maybe this will make me think twice about the things that I see in terms of actual politics. Maybe I will think twice about just agreeing with something because it's prescribed as a thing that I need to agree with. Or maybe there's a way to understand the shared humanity. I know that sounds cheesy, but like I do think that is the role of art in a lot of ways, is to understand our shared humanity. Because let me tell you, like politics and the news cycle are definitely not the places that we can look to for our shared humanity. Watching the inauguration or watching a political debate, that is not going to help us understand our shared humanity. It's art that I think will. I think it's really, really important. And whether you're understanding that shared humanity because you're coming together over understanding we're all people and we have the same values deep, 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 deep down, that's one way to approach it. Another is we're all people and we can find anything ridiculous and we can laugh and find lighthearted moments in anything. And you'd be surprised at what, you know, something that you might think is funny that somebody on the opposite of the political spectrum might also think is funny. And maybe it's because at the core, you're both feeling a certain sense of dissatisfaction or a certain, you know, shared reaction to things that are going on, even if the news that you're consuming and everything you're consuming is opposite. At the end of the day, I think half of the time why we don't agree with other people, it's not because we don't have a shared sense of, you know, life being an important thing or the basic values of life. We want people to live and be happy and exist harmoniously. I think most people agree with that, but we're all consuming completely different sources of information and we're being told completely different things. And so we're looking at that and we believe that that's right because it's kind of our echo chamber that we're seeing. And I think oftentimes if we would switch places and grow up in the same way with the exact same surroundings in the media, that the other person consumed, we might believe what they believe. You know, it's so informed by all of that. I don't think it's really the people at the core of it. So I think comedy can serve to show that we do have certain areas where we can kind of come together and certain similarities.
There's this great story about a Grandmaster of the Ku Klux Klan, which is like high up. He might have been like a Grandmaster Dragon. They have some crazy names. The higher you move up the ranks, but he was a big jazz fan, and he goes into this club, and he sees this black man playing piano, and he compliments him. He says he probably said something like, "You play good for a black man." And he probably didn't say a black man. And anyway, this guy doesn't get upset, and he talks jazz with him. And the Klansman comes back, and this takes place for like a year, and they keep talking jazz. He listens to him, they talk jazz. He listens to him, they talk jazz. They become great friends, really, really great friends. Fast forward a couple of years, the Klansman leaves the Klan. He sees this man as more than a black man who can play jazz, as more than just a jazz man. He sees him as a man, and they build this budding relationship. And leaving the Klan from such a high standard, mainly because you became friends with a black person, was not easy for him, as you can imagine. And I do think that is the value of art, of third things, of jazz, of music, of comedy, maybe even coffee too, right? Like two people from different opposing views can fall in love with a bean, and how best to grind or appreciate or smell that bean, and that's what I think is very beautiful about art making, and why we need it in this troubling time, or just honest time, maybe not troubling.
We've already done the thing where we fight in the comments and where we just really just do everything we can to make our point and get really, really, really angry anytime we see somebody with a really opposite view. That story is a great example of the shared humanity that exists. I do believe that shared humanity exists, with most people. And I think our experiences are so clouded by what we've seen and been exposed to growing up. I mean, everything that we care about is probably because there's some sort of personal link that we have to that cause. And the more people you speak, how is a person with an opposing view ever going to experience a personal link to that cause if we never talk to them and we refuse to talk to them and we only make art for ourselves and we don't include anybody else in that? It's good for a lot of people to be included, even if it's just because they're commenting. Sometimes I see certain comments that are like, I don't even know whose side to take in this. Everybody's equally annoying. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe think about that. Like, just as much as sometimes maybe the shared humanity isn't always the most interesting angle. Maybe sometimes.
Well, what's interesting about that is you also don't have to take a side.
Yeah.
I think that's a thing. We think we have to be left or right. And one of the ethos of this podcast and of my book and of my work is I think things are more interesting in the middle.
Yeah.
Being in that uncomfortable middle where it's not he, she, this, that, yes, no, right, wrong. There's this whole gray space that is tougher, more beautiful, more vibrant, more grimy, more mushy, more all of these things that we don't always have to pick a side.
Yeah. Also, we are forced to pick a side ASAP because of social media and the way that things have panned out, when really there are a lot of these things we don't really know much about. Like, something will happen, and I'm not talking about really big political things in this instance. I'm talking about, let's say something specific happens. We don't know how it's going to pan out yet, what the left point of view will be and what the right point of view will be. We read the thing that happened, and immediately we need to have an opinion on what it is. Well, we don't know anything yet. We read one article, right? And some of these issues, honestly, most issues take years of people spend years in doing research to have a more round understanding. And I'm not saying you should never form an opinion. Of course, we all will and do and should. But at the same time, I think it's important to understand that learning is a really, really big part of it. And you just can't exist in an echo chamber. I mean, you can, but I don't think that's very helpful. Just continuing to say things over and over to people that feel exactly the same way that you do, it doesn't do much. I think it is important to at least be open to listening and watching what's going on, if nothing else, just for your own knowledge and understanding.
And listening and watching is how you seem to come up with your comedy. So maybe there's some medicine in just learning to listen and watch more.
I'm so curious. You have had this long career as an artist. What would you say are your like main takeaways of how to be an artist in today's world? That's like a general question, but I think today's world is changing so fast. It's so hard to figure out how to keep up with everything. And you've been doing this longer than me, and I'm curious like what your advice is on that front.
I think being an artist at any time in history is both important, beautiful, and difficult. I think it's more difficult now just because of literal monetary, like a coffee cost, $8. And once upon a time, you could have maybe a part-time job and pay your rent and get your coffee. And so the actual monetary thing is the real samurai work. Like, how do I afford my life? As simple or as glamorous as I want it to be, how do I afford my life and still be an artist? Which is make what I want to make, explore what I want to explore, engage with what I want to engage with. Artists are samurais. It is a high form of living. It's masterful. You have to navigate your ego, your soul, your intelligence. All of these things, we're mathematicians, we're doing so many calculations. What do I need now? What can I afford emotionally, physically? And I think it's been that way at all times in history. And how I do it is just, I stay really curious. I'd rather be broke than bored. My spiritual practice is very important to me. I try to remember that also I'm not the things I make. Like, I love the things I make and I want to make things, but I'm not the things I make. They don't leave with me when I leave. And that is important to me too. Yeah, they don't define me.
I love what you said, because I feel like sometimes with art, you have certain feelings, like exactly what you said about, you have to grapple with ego and you have to grapple with reality. That's so true. It's something that if you don't do that, your art won't resonate because it won't come across, as truthful. So I love what you said about that. And also it's true about just being able to survive as an artist. This is the number one conversation I have with people. How are you managing to make this work? Because it's gotten difficult, and we have to be so creative with how we piece together the puzzle of like our annual income. I love what you said.
I have with this brilliant woman, Zandy Brackett. Zandy said, "Are you an artist if no one sees or reads your stuff?" And this is one that I struggle with, because I also do believe in the other. Like, I need your eyes, I need your ears, I need your cameras, whatever that is. We are in relation with each other. We're in dialogue. And yet, if I lived in sort of a cabin and was peaceful, I still think I am an artist.
Yeah, I grapple with that as well, because, what I mentioned about being results oriented, I'm not saying that that's the best way to be at all. I think, a lot of artists say that you can't be results oriented if you are an artist. And when I say results oriented, I don't mean it in the sense of necessarily every single thing needs to be a hit and I'm only thinking about what will be. It's not that, obviously not that, but you want people to see it, you want people to engage with it, and you want to be able to make a living so you can keep doing it. To me, that's a super important part of it, is the practical element of that, because without that, then I can't do it. You can't just keep doing it. But I don't know if that's necessarily the best way. I think there's some artists out there that are really more the cabin in the woods genre, and I respect that too. I think it's awesome. It's not so much my genre because I really like the interaction.
I like thinking of it as a genre. Cabin
I know. You're either
genre.
cabin or you were like whatever it is that we're up to. But and I think there's also periods of time for that. You could be, you can cabin in the woods it for a year and create so much interesting stuff and really introspect. And then the next year, maybe you're putting out all sorts of stuff for people to engage with. But I love the part where people, the internet can be crazy, but at the same time, I like the idea that people are interacting with the things that I put out there, because there's nothing cooler than writing, especially kind of like a niche joke that you don't think that you just think is so funny and that's maybe a little weird, putting it out there and seeing somebody really engage with that joke. I once had somebody change their Instagram bio to a line that I wrote in a really niche video, and I was like,
Cool.
this is so cool. This is cool. So I like that. It fuels me to know that people are engaging with it. It's
I love
a
that.
big question about really what it means to be an artist.
Yeah, think about it. Well, you know, we have to stop thinking about it and live it. And we do live it, and the best of us will live it, but it's worth the examination, because I think anything you love is worth the examination. You know, if you're in a relationship, it's actually healthy to say, am I willing to do this work again today? To re-meet it, to re-love it, to reimagine it, to not take it for granted. I think that's healthy. How can people engage with you, hang out with you, learn from you?
Well, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Winnie_the Pooge. Look, there's a lot of Poojas in the world. That's why I have the underscore, because we're all Winnie the Pooges. So Winnie_the Pooge. And then I'm also on Substack now, and I'm writing longer form stuff, which I'm excited about because it's really different than, you know, the quick videos. So you can subscribe to my Substack, and I try to write, you know, relatively consistently. And I'm on YouTube. My merch is also at the link in my bio in all those places. And you can send me a DM or an email if you're interested in engaging beyond just following. If people want to just watch the coffee shop, it has its own Instagram at BK Coffee Shop. And all the posts are all there. All the episodes, you can binge it. It'll take you 10 minutes.
BK Coffee Shop didn't exist?
It didn't exist.
That's
Can you believe
insane.
it? I know. No, I really should be running to every platform and grabbing BK Coffee Shop.
That's wild. I've been fucking with Substack. I love Substack, even though it's
Cool, right?
quickly turning into just every other form of social media. It's funny how that happens.
Well, I know. I don't want to engage with that process. I like the fact that I can just write something longer and that anybody would be interested in reading it, because, you know, everything else is very, you want to keep people's attention and it's hard, but this is an area where I don't think about that. So that's kind of fun creatively as well.
Anything else?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was a really interesting conversation. And to be honest, I'm going to be thinking about some of these things you said about what it means to be an artist. And this is the type of thing I write down in my notes app that becomes somehow a video or something at some point. So I think that's what's going to happen.
Well, that's the alchemizing, right? Like that's the word I love and try to embody, is we are alchemists and we alchemize in different ways. And so, you know, you take these maybe philosophical thoughts and you alchemize them into humor, and that's your ability to turn coal into gold. And every artist alchemizes in their own way. The world meets their bloodstream, and they figure out how to turn it into gold. And so that's your alchemizing gift. And so I thank you. That's our time. I love y'all. Tell your friends, share the show, like, subscribe. You know how it works. Email us with your stories and your ideas at brownenoughproductions@gmail.com. Don't be shy. I'll see you next week. Peace.